Naka ngavangu ngau Lusi Lasaga au ngai Tutu. It's been 14 years now. We were both involved in the courses for married couples, single women, and young farmers. So now I'm going to add on to what Waisia have explained earlier regarding the compost making, the process of making compost, and joining it on how to make compost tea. Before that, I want to go back and just a little bit add on to what my colleagues have already explained regarding compost. What is the importance of making compost and its link to soil health, and also the importance of compost tea making. One of the very important key in making compost, and why we are making compost tea, is to help regenerate degraded soil, reduce input cost, and increase productions. We have in the past years, during our courses, especially the married farming couples course, we have been using a block years after years, and we have been using excessive use of chemicals on that vegetable blocks. We have seen that the land is losing its fertility. It's no longer fertile. So going through some workshops regarding a soil school and how to make soil probiotic and biovital compost tea, we are trying to implement it. And so we have found out very an improvement on that area, on that same block of land that we have been using over the years. It's been very productive while we have been using compost and compost tea as well. In making compost, one thing that we have to be careful and we have to be sure of is our ingredient. We have to be more aware of all the nutrients, all the minerals that we have to put on in our stack of compost to make it more, to add on more nutrients into the soil. On the other hand, understanding the soil food web, the role of all these soil biologies, how it works and its roles in the soil, and we want to help in the sustainability of our farm management and the management of our resources. So from compost, like over the years, we have been buying fertilizer from the shop, normally NPKs, to boost our vegetables. So now in our compost, the same NPK that we buy from the shop, we make our own NPK in our compost stack, the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. That is why my colleagues wise have explained earlier why we have to put brown as the source of carbon in the soil, and the green as a source of nitrogen, and also potassium in the soil, in our compost. So if you closely look at that matured, the final pile of the compost, if you dig a handful of that compost, it contains millions of microorganisms, millions of microorganisms. Some of our staff who came to explain to us that a teaspoon of compost contains millions of microorganisms. So in making compost tea, the process ready here, a half bag of compost. When you take this compost and smell it, it got a fresh, earthly smell. It's very nutritious. So what we do is that we take about 3 kilos of compost, 3 kg of compost, full of microorganisms. Millions and millions of microorganisms are in this compost. So what we did is that we fill a 2,000 liter drum by using this machine, a BioVital BioBrew machine. We turn it on. Before adding the compost, we have to put on the machine to generate air. So this container has got 2,000 aerated water in this drum. So we have to put on the machine 1 hour before we add the compost. So when we put in this compost, contain millions and millions of microorganisms into this drum, and generated for 24 hours. Yeah, we generated it for 24 hours. From millions into billions and billions of microorganisms. So by using chemicals in our soil, degraded soil, we are losing these microorganisms. So what we need is putting these microorganisms back into the soil to boost it. So this is one of the way why we make compost tea. From there, from this into the field after 24 hours. These microorganisms will only live within the 24 hours, surviving on the air that has been generated in the tank. Yes. Yeah, I think those are some of the informations regarding this.
Okay, so Lucy, thank you so much for explaining that. Now, one question. When the compost is in here, do we have to keep adding things to it to keep the microbe level up, or how does it work?
Sure, we have to feed the microbes.
Right.
We have to feed it with like molasses.
Yeah.
We have to add in like a liter of molasses to help feed the microbes. They'll feed on sugar.
Yeah.
Sugar and a little bit kelp goes all in there.
So with sugar, can people use the sugar that you can buy from the shop?
No. We get the molasses from the sugar factory.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And the other thing I wanted to ask you is like, why do you have it covered? Why is it so important to have it covered like this?
We have to keep, the reason is why we have to keep the stack covered all the time is because of the nitrogen. We don't want to lose the nitrogen that are in this stack.
Right.
The nitrogen source, the green leaves,
Yeah.
the green leaves and the chicken manure, they are very high in nitrogen. And we just don't choose any kind of green around us. We have to choose a green that has got a high percentage of nitrogen in it.
Right.
Like some of the greens, some of the source of this high nitrogen percentage in it are the legume trees, legume plants, like Kaliandra. We've got Gliricidia, Bainivangi, Mokuna beans.
Yeah.
Mokuna beans, those are some of the greens that have stored high nitrogen.
Oh.
Yes. And also chicken manure. That's why we have to keep the stack covered all the time. And right until it is ready, we have to put it in a bag, a plastic bag,
Yeah.
and tie it up.
And it has
Just
to be airtight.
Yeah, it has to be airtight to avoid the nitrogen from leakage.
Escaping.
And while adding it also into the soil, so this is our manure. This is our manure.
Right.
Then buying NPKs and other fertilizers from the shop, we use this manure. And the thing we have to do is we have to put this manure as a base underneath before we put our veg or ndalo or yangona.
Okay.
And covered it with soil. We just don't put it on top. We'll lose all the nitrogen.
Wow.
So we have to be.
It's a whole process. Like you have to be on top of it.
Question might be this is why nitrogen's important. Why nitrogen? Why is nitrogen so important?
Okay.
Could you answer that?
We can go into that green system. Okay, you mentioned nitrogen quite a bit. Why is that so important for our soil?
Nitrogen is very important in the soil because of this, the microbes and all the microorganisms in the soil. They need air. They need air to feed, to breathe.
Yeah.
That's why it is very important in the soil. All this nitrogen and nitrogen fixing bacteria, nitrification, all those minerals and nutrient source in the soil.
All right. So green, like you mentioned, there are certain greens that are quite high in them, including
nitrogen,
chicken manure. So like this. Okay. It's
Yes.
very interesting.
That's why we have to like keep the stack up.
Yeah.
And that is why also another reason why we have to keep the stack covered is because of the temperature. We have to maintain the temperature. The temperature will help the decomposition of the compost more quickly.
Right. So
The
it's like
temperature.
it's got heat in
Yeah,
there.
it's got heat in there.
Okay.
So that's why when we after the weekly turn of the compost, we have to put our hands, step our hand inside, and just try to feel the temperature of the compost of the stem. It makes the decomposition of the compost much more quicker.
And how do you know when it's finally ready for use?
The compost.
Yeah.
When it's all the compost, it's got it's turned out into soil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then it's
It
okay.
was-
Nice.
See all these things, all these living things, they are all interconnected. They are all interconnected. Like the plant, through photosynthesis, converts sunlight into sugars.
Yeah.
And plant acts as a sugar factory, dumping excess sugars to the root. So these microorganisms, all these soil biologies, underneath the roots in the soil, they need the sugars from the plant to feed. And likewise for the plant, need all these nutrients and minerals. So it's all interconnected.
Yeah.
They all support each other. Interesting.
Very interesting.
Very interesting.